It really is about serving your community, serving your family, and serving yourself, serving your own soul and kind of what makes you happy and what makes you feel fulfilled and what you're doing day to day.
H. Beecher Hicks is a proven executive leader. He's been an investment banker, a private equity investor, worked in the executive branch of government, and is an entrepreneur, public speaker, and a writer. As president and CEO of the National Museum of African American Music, he facilitated the museum design and construction to open the iconic institution in January of 2021. He's a lifetime member of the National Black MBA Association and recently assumed the role of president and CEO. Let's learn about Henry Hicks and why he's intent on making a difference in everything he does.
We're glad you joined us to hear these inspiring stories from older adults, people who have so much experience and words of wisdom to share, but are sometimes overlooked in society today. I'm Sally Hussey, the CEO of 50 Forward, a Nashville-based nonprofit. Our mission is to support, champion, and enhance the lives of those 50 and older.
And I'm Susan Sizemore, your guide through these beautiful conversations with those who are living life to the fullest and who know how to squeeze the day in their second chapter of life. Now, in my second chapter and encore career, I'm following my passion for sharing the stories of older adults with you and with the world. If you like what you hear, please rate and follow Squeeze the Day on your favorite podcast platform. Today's Squeeze the Day is brought to you by the All of Us Research Program from the National Institutes of Health. Learn how you can help change the future of health by participating in the program. Visit www.joinallofus.org to learn more. Welcome to Squeeze the Day.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you today. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, let's. You've got such an interesting history. And I know the first time you crossed my radar when you at least came to Nashville and got involved with that very iconic museum, I started thinking, I just can't imagine being in that office behind that seat. So first, I want to talk a little bit about what do you consider your most impactful business accomplishment?
Well, look, I think it has got to be creating the National Museum of African American Music. It's not only was it a lot of fun, but not only was I able to feed my family as a result of it, and I guess that's why we have careers, but also because of the impact that it had on so many other people who were passionate about making sure it happened, and people who were really invested in making Nashville a better city as a result of having something like this in place. And then, most importantly, the artists who are honored and who will be honored in the future, and then the people who get the opportunity to come visit the museum every day. It really impacts lives and in a creative and thoughtful and historical kind of a way. And so much of what we do or what we should do is beyond ourselves. And this is one of those things that I really am very proud of because it's beyond me.
What a powerful statement. I wonder also, too, given the roots of Nashville as a place where the civil rights, some of the lunch counter sit-ins and other things took place, was that also part of the decision behind the museum and its location, and especially its location on Lower Broadway, which I think is also very interesting?
Yes. I mean, the origin of the museum actually was going to be called the Museum of African American Music, Art, and Culture. And I really kind of shorthand that to mean, I think the idea was for it to be the city's Black History Museum, really to deal with kind of so much of the excellence that has come out of this part of the state, and this part of the country, from the Tiger Bells over at TSU to the Fish Jubilee Singers, to so many other athletes that have come out of this part of the country, as well as the folks who are prolific writers and fine artists, and then, of course, the civil rights leadership that came out of Nashville. So all of that was intended to be included in the scope of the museum originally. And, I think the project was having difficulty getting traction with that in terms of the matching the scope of the vision to the scope of the budget. There was a little bit of a disconnect. So by changing the name of the museum to the National Museum of African American Music, it allowed us to tell a bigger story in a way that people could more easily grasp as something that more people might feel a personal connection to. But one of the things that we certainly did, and you can tell this as you go through the museum, is we told the story with a special eye towards Nashville and with a special eye towards really the history of our country. And so in bubbling out that history in the context of the music, you're able to see a lot of the fine artists that came out of Tennessee and a lot of the athletes that came out of Tennessee and the civil rights movement that came out of Tennessee. So we're able to get at the art and the culture piece that was lost in the name change. We very intentionally tried to make sure we were able to get at it by telling the story of the music through those prisms.
Mm-hmm. And it's so well done. It's such a beautiful museum. Before I forget, I also want to ask about, on a personal level, what's one of your most proudest accomplishments?
Oh my gosh! Well, I've got two sons. They are 22 and they are 20 and 24. Henry the Fourth is 24 and he lives in Washington. He works for an organization called PEN America, where he is fighting for First Amendment rights, people to be able to write and speak what they'd like to be able to do. And then Harrison is a graduate of the New School in New York, and he's still living there, where he's doing public relations for classical musicians, and he's also continuing to compose classical and experimental music. And those two guys really have grown to be fabulous young men who I like to say really represent the best of us. And so I'm really very, very proud of them and proud to have been a part in their growing up.
Oh, without a doubt. Tell us a little about your roots.
I was born in Rochester, New York. I am the son of a preacher and the son of an elementary school teacher. Ultimately, we settled in Washington, D.C., where my mom taught school for a little bit, but she mostly was very involved in our community in D.C. And then my dad pastored a church in Washington called Metropolitan Baptist Church. And so then I left Washington when I was about 17 and went down to Atlanta. I went to Morehouse College and got a degree in marketing, and then went to the University of North Carolina and got a degree in finance, and then started a business career that was in consulting and banking and private equity and those kinds of things. And that's part of what led me to Nashville. I bought a business in Nashville with a business partner, and that was the Gray Line of Tennessee Bus Company. So we bought that business in 2009. And then while I was operating that business, I joined the board of the museum. And that's what got me connected to the museum. I thought it would be a great thing to connect the bus company with the museum, and they could help one another. So I got involved with the museum, and then I had no idea that I would become the CEO and have the privilege of bringing it to life for the city and for the region.
What a phenomenal background, education leading you obviously in the direction you took. But one thing that you didn't touch on, and I just want to touch on it for a minute, you also worked at the White House as part of the White House Fellow with the Clinton administration?
I did. That was a phenomenal experience for me, and it was mostly an experience in humility. Really, at the time, I was working at Bank of America doing investment banking work, and on the one hand, I had kind of bought into this idea that investment bankers were among the smartest and most accomplished people in the world, and I was having the opportunity to be one of them. But on the other hand, I was stressed out beyond belief. I competed twice before I was able to win a White House fellowship, and had the opportunity to go work for the Corporation for National Service and lead the launching of an AmeriCorps program called the AmeriCorps Promise Fellows Program. For President Clinton had made a promise to General Colin Powell, and so I led the effort to get that up and going. And then, ironically, or maybe not coincidentally, when Henry IV first graduated from college, his first job out of college was working at the Corporation for National Service in Washington. And so he got to work as a recent college graduate with some of the same people I worked with while I was at the White House. So really kind of a phenomenal coincidence in our lives there. But the amazingness of the experience was not about going to the White House. It was not about meeting the president, spending some time with him. It was not about meeting the other cabinet officials. But it really was about meeting my classmates. So there were another 20 or so White House fellows that I was in the class with. Those people were smarter than me, better looking than me, more energetic than me, and none of them were investment bankers, maybe one. They were doing all kinds of other things. They were contributing to our country in all kinds of ways. And those people were and remain so impressive to me about what they do and why they do it that, I was able, number one, to kind of realize that, I needed to take myself down a notch in terms of what I thought of myself, but also needed to elevate some others a notch and really admired and continue to admire the many ways that people can contribute to our community and to our society. And so I have approached my career since that time in a very different way, where I was very much more selfish about what I wanted to do, but selfish in the sense that it's not all about the money. It's not all about kind of what appears to be the outward power, but it really is about serving your community, serving your family, and serving yourself, serving your own soul and kind of what makes you happy and what makes you feel fulfilled in what you're doing day to day. And so that is the value for me of being a White House fellow.
Boy, all of that speaks to something that I think our listeners will really enjoy. A lot of people think they need to chase the almighty dollar, and most of us, kind of in our second chapter or somewhere along the lines of life, you start to realize, is this all it's about? And then, maybe you hit that mark with something that really more resonates about service or something that is fulfilling. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And as a leader today in such a diverse and ever-changing work environment with technology and with various ages working together and various backgrounds of people joining together, what sort of innovations do you see kind of at the forefront of leaders today or of leadership today?
Well, I think you touched on some of them. I think we're all really trying to figure out how to manage in an environment where individuality maybe is more celebrated than it was generations ago, where everyone's unique perspective, unique experiences, unique skill can be deployed. And so I think we're all trying to figure those kinds of things out. How can we make the most of the team that we have, while also being more respectful of maybe boundaries that people have or need to have to kind of, put breaks in between what is the work life and what is the family life. I really try to advocate for what I call work-life flow. And that is to say that there is no such thing as a balance. So on some days, I'm going to spend, 14 hours working and, after I spend a few hours sleeping, it's going to be time to get back to work. But then there might be other days when I spend 14 hours playing, and not a whole lot of time working. And I think that's a part of the flow of work. But I think we're all trying to figure that out these days in a way that maybe generations before we didn't. How do we accommodate people who don't prefer to work in person? I'm having to get adjusted not only to people not working in the same office as I do, but sometimes working in other states. And so really trying to accommodate and find the talent to build the team without being as rigid as maybe we had been in generations past.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you a little bit about COVID-19 and how it has affected all of our lives, but also, you were at the museum at that time too. So let's talk a little bit about that and then, kind of how it has impacted what we're doing today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so we built and opened the museum during the pandemic. And, one of the first things that I learned in that process is that my coworkers need each other. We were, during that period of time, especially when we were all confined to our homes with very little opportunity to go even outside, our teammates needed one another. And so we spent time as a team, not just talking about the work that we had to do, but we had spent time talking about the personal challenges that we were having and the way that we could support one another. And so that was something that I really was so impressed by, was the way that our team wanted to be there to support one another in ways outside of just getting the work done. I think we also learned that you can be productive and you can be sometimes even more productive working in an environment that is not in an office. But I also observed that you can persevere, that you can do hard things even in hard times. And so, goodness, Don Harden was our project manager, and there was a group of 3 construction-related companies that came together to be the general contractor for our work, and they kept the work maybe not exactly on schedule. There was a little bit of a glitch in the supply chain along the way, and not to mention, they were trying to keep their employees healthy as well. But they managed to keep the work moving forward, even though times were tough. And so good communication, dedication to the mission, and, some laughter along the way, kind of to try to overcome the necessary and the arguments or the disagreements that are going to come when you try to do something like that, kind of keeping that in balance and reminding ourselves we're all on the same team. All of that really kind of came out of that experience of doing that.
Yeah, the lens on life certainly changed at that point. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about any like high points at NAM, or, I just have to also wonder about, did you get to meet any of your musical heroes or their family members? There has to be some great stuff there.
There were. I mean, it was one of the things I learned in that process really is, artists are people too. And so, I mean, there were definitely some high points. But it wasn't, once again, I mean, sort of people expect when I tell the White House Fellow story that I'm going to talk about the White House and the president. And the same is kind of true with the museum. I mean, really, the high points were seeing the magic of what the team was able to do. We have an intro film in the theater when you go into the museum. It's about 15 minutes long. And that film was filmed during the pandemic. And the filmmaker literally sent film crews to some of the people that were interviewed for the film, sent them to their home with a sterilized film recording package, microphone and everything, left it at the door while on the telephone with the artist, and said, I'm in my truck. All you have to do is go to the porch, pick that up, set up the microphone, hit the green button, and the camera will come on, and we can talk that way. And so they did the interviews without meeting the artist, and the interviews were done without personal interaction with the folks who were interviewed. And you would never know it when you see it. I mean, they're beautifully shot and that kind of thing, but there was a magic or some miracle associated with pulling those things together, even during that very difficult period of time. So those were the kinds of high points. But I did get to meet some pretty cool artists, and folks like the artist Her come to mind. Earth, Wind, and Fire came to the museum, and I got to hang out with them for a little bit. I got to meet 50 Cent. But I've really also got to know artists like Keb Mo and Dr. Bobby Jones and Vince Gill, all of whom who have become friends, and just getting to know them through working with them at the museum over time. And it's just a wonderful thing to broaden my own set of relationships. So not all my friends now are investment bankers or business people. I've got a few friends that know how to sing or play an instrument, and so that's a lot of fun. Adds a dimension of richness to my life.
I will say I love the way you approach that response, because I worked in entertainment as well, back in the day. But one of the things that's so special about Nashville is we look at Nashville, like the artists are just like us. We all do the same sort of thing. Their profession is performing, and they're on a stage, and, they've got more fame. But I love the way you position that, because I think that's one of the things that makes Nashville so beautiful is so many people come through here and they're just people.
Yeah, that's right.
If this conversation is motivating you to squeeze the day, learn more about getting involved in your home community, to deliver food, to volunteer, or to just get active. If you'd like to learn more, visit 54ward.org. That's FIFTYFORWARD.org. There's so much to gain by helping others. Now, let's get back to our show. So let's talk a little bit now about your new role. So you stepped down from NAM and have taken on another very important role for a different reason. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I am honored to be the CEO of the National Black MBA Association. It's an organization that I first joined probably in about 1992, and I'm a life member of the organization. And it was so important to me early in my business career because it helped me get a job. And more than helping me get a job, it helped me to understand what the options and opportunities were in corporate America, helped me to understand and get to know some people who are leading executives in the corporate sphere. So really put me on a path to thinking about and understanding what the opportunities were for me as a business person. And so really to kind of come full circle at this stage in my career and have the opportunity to follow leading the museum with leading this organization, again, one that was so important to me early in my career, is a real privilege.
That's another kind of ministry and another kind of giving back. I think
That's right.
that is full circle moment. That's really cool. I also read about your involvement with Freaknik back probably, I'm guessing, in your college days. So I thought it might be fun to talk a little bit about that early music event.
So I was president of an organization called the DC Metro Club, which was at that time in the Atlanta University Center complex. The schools shared state clubs to bring together students at all of the schools in that complex to just socialize and do public service or community service kinds of activities. I was a business manager of that organization in my sophomore year in college. And the president and vice president were both online pledging a sorority. And so I had to lead Freaknik that year in 1987. And then I was president of the DC Metro Club the next 2 years. I led it from 1987 through 1989. So it was 3 years of leading that event. And I like to say I did not start the event. It started in about 1983 or so. But I did blow it up. So I did do some entrepreneurial things like introduce vendors and people to sell T-shirts and barbecue ribs at the event. I did bring live music to the event. And so we moved it from a couple of hundred people just sitting in the park having a good time to maybe 10,000 people in the park with a live band or a couple of live bands and a DJ. And that's when it really began to be problematic for the city of Atlanta. And thankfully, I left and went on to start a business career, and when it really kind of careened a bit out of control. But that was a tremendous experience for me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I do think that it was kind of the beginning of an entrepreneurial career. The combination of ideas and execution to make something happen beyond what people imagine that it could be. I just didn't know what an entrepreneur was at that time. I just knew that this was a great idea and it could be bigger, it could be better, and we could figure out a way to make some money at it. And we did. And interestingly enough, the reason that we made money, the state clubs had in their charter with the universities that the bank accounts that we had could have no more than $50 in them at the end of the school year. So you would, every year, you do community service activities and things of that nature. And we'd do bake sales, or we'd sell Krispy Kreme donuts, or if we got really fancy, we'd sell Dunkin' Donuts. We'd do bus trips back and forth between Atlanta and in the DC area to get folks back and forth for Thanksgiving and that kind of thing. And we did it all at a profit. And then at the end of the year, we gave all the money away. So Freaknik was a way initially not only to kind of have a good time over that spring break period, but it was also a way to spend the money that had been raised during the course of the school year. Well, when I started selling sponsorships and things of that nature to Freaknik, we wound up making money off of the event. So at the end of the year, we just had more money that we could give away to charities in the local community. That's what we had to do so we could get the bank account down to $50. So that's kind of what it was about.
Getting it down to $50 just kind of made me think that is quite an accomplishment, especially if you've been working hard, because most organizations do work to raise money, not to spend it down. But if you're giving it back, that's another full circle moment too.
Yeah.
Now you're working on a book, right? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I am. So I am finished with at least the second rewrite of the book, and I am now hoping that my agent will get a publisher to pick it up. But the book is called Generation 4, There's Power in the Name. The book is really about my son. As I mentioned, my oldest son is Henry IV. And so it really tells the story of 4 generations of H. Beecher Hicks. And it really kind of starts actually 2 generations before that. So it starts with my great-great-grandfather and really tells the story of of his ability to be released from slavery once the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, and then he named his son, that was Albert Squire Hicks, who wandered off the plantation. It was the Kirby family plantation. And he wandered off and he saw on a post office not too far from the plantation where he'd been living, he saw up on the post office wall a sign of someone of prominence in that community. His last name was Hicks. So he changed his name from Kirby to Hicks. And so that's where Hicks came from. And then his son, he named William. And then William had a son who he named Henry Beecher Hicks. And what's interesting about that story is that William Hicks went to divinity school. So William Hicks was maybe the first minister in the family, or one of the first. And he went to school at the time when a man by the name of Henry Ward Beecher was known as the most famous man in America. And that would be the brother of famed Harriet Beecher Stowe. So from the name Henry Ward Beecher, he named his son after the most famous man in America, Henry Beecher, and then with Hicks as the last name. And so that's where my name came from. So I tell the story of where the name comes from, and it's not just the last name, it's the first name and the middle name as well. And then I interview maybe 15 or 20 other prominent Americans, and I ask them about their names and the significance of their names and how they have passed along what is in their name, what is the power in their name. And really it has to do with traditions and things that matter to your family. What are the things that allow you to pass down rich tradition from generation to generation? And in my case, from Henry Beecher Hicks, my grandfather, to my son, Henry Beecher Hicks IV. So how do we pass those things from generation to generation to make sure that there is indeed power in the name? And so that's what I explore in the book. Hopefully coming to a bookstore near you in the coming months.
That is a fabulous, powerful story, and I think it will have a lot of impact. I just love everything you said about it. I can't wait to see the book.
Thank you.
I have just a quick speed round of questions that we sometimes play with people just because it's fun to hear what people say. So, quick responses to things like, how do you stay active and healthy?
Boxing, golf, and cycling sometimes.
Wow. Okay. How do you spend your spare time?
What spare time?
I knew you were going to say that because that's what my head just said.
So I do I write. I like to write. So writing for me is a way of solving problems and for releasing stress.
Do you write any songs? I just have to ask that. You're in Nashville.
I have never written a song as far as I can recall. I might have to give it a shot.
You might have to call that friend Vince and see about writing a song.
I wonder if we could work something out.
About your book, about a little history. There's something there.
Yeah.
The power in the name.
Yeah.
Seed planted. Advice for your younger self.
Don't take it all so seriously.
And what's on your bucket list?
Running with the bulls in Pamplona.
Never saw that coming, but okay. So I have two closing questions that we ask all of our guests. One is, what is one piece of advice that your parents or an older adult might have asked that at the time you thought, this is really silly, but today that phrase rings true in your everyday life?
My mother used to say, don't carry a lazy man's load. And I think what she meant was really to take your time and do it the right way. She would get on me for picking up 20 things at a time and trying to carry them upstairs. She said, you know what, you'll be much better off if you take 2 trips instead of 1. So you don't have to be a lazy man. Just get it right the first time.
And what is it that you do to squeeze the day?
Gosh, I love to just kind of get outside and enjoy the weather, even if it's just for a few minutes, and make sure to pause and recognize what's going on around me. And so I try to do that a few times a day. Just stop what I'm doing and look around and observe and make sure that I'm really taking in what's going on. I began to do that 24 years ago when I had my first son. And one of the things that I realized was, children have a way of making you see or allowing you to see the world through from a very different vantage point. So I remember my sons from time to time saying, "Daddy, look at the clouds," or, "Daddy, what's that over there?" And I would, whenever they called on me for just about anything, but certainly those moments, I would drop whatever I was doing to focus on their question and make sure it was answered thoroughly. And so that's a habit that I developed with their help. So that's something I really try to do to squeeze the day.
That's a great perspective for every parent. And for those who don't have kids, I hope they can find a younger individual to help kind of foster that new experience in life. I want to thank you, Henry, for joining us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And as I leave you today, I'm sending you a big squeeze. Until next time. Squeeze the Day is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy this podcast, please help us continue to share inspiring stories of older adults and visit 54.org. That's FIFTYFORWARD.org to make a contribution. And now I challenge everyone listening to go squeeze the day.